Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for coming. My name is Charles Berman. I am the receiver of taxes for the town of North Hempstead. I've been receiver of taxes for the past 10 years, and happy to say that I'm going to continue to be receiver of taxes for at least the next 4 years. I want to thank the Westbury Library for hosting us tonight, and I want to thank all of you for coming. Tonight we're going to do a presentation regarding how to file a challenge to your property's assessment. And I have a few very important announcements to make before I begin. First thing is that today the Assessment Review Commission put on their website that they are going to extend the grievance period. Normally, by law, the grievance period ends March 2nd. So they did state today that they're going to extend it until April 2nd of 2020. It's on their website. I think that county executive did, by executive order, ask the Assessment Review Commission to do that, and it will probably be formally taken up by the county legislature shortly. The second thing I want everybody to keep in mind while they're listening to the whole presentation, that as all of you know, we did have a brand new reassessment in Nassau County beginning last year in January of 2019. It's the first time the county reassessed properties since 2009. So the values were much, much different than the values that had previously been on the assessment roll. So everybody saw a very big increase in your market value. What the county executive said, County Executive Laura Curran said last year, was that she wanted these increased values to be phased in, to be transitionalized in, that she was going to go to Albany to lobby for that and get a law passed for Nassau County. So she did do that. She went to the state legislature, they passed the law, the governor signed it, and essentially right now it's in its last stage. It has to be approved by the Nassau County legislature. So the last information I have is that they're going to take that up in committee this month. They have until July to actually opt into that. But I think that from everything I've heard that that's most likely going to happen. So keep that in mind, that the new increased value that you received last year most likely will be phased in, transitionalized in over the next 5 years. So essentially, we're going to begin by just showing you a timeline of events, and I want to explain a few things before we actually show you the application. And the first thing is really to actually understand what the process is and how it works. There are two separate departments in Nassau County that are involved in this process. First department is the Nassau County Department of Assessment, and they're the ones that actually value the property. They're in charge of assigning the value to your property. The second agency is the Nassau County Assessment Review Commission. They're the ones that receive all of these grievance applications. So there are two separate agencies. They're both very important to the process. They both have very important websites, which we're going to get into tonight. And you actually have to look at them and study them and do some research before you actually decide or before you go forward to file one of these grievance applications. So the process begins on the first day of January, the first day of business. That's the day every year that the Nassau County Department of Assessment publishes a brand new assessment roll. And it's always different from the year before. Now the county has gotten back into the process of valuing properties every year. So the assessment roll that they published this year is actually a little bit different than the assessment roll they published last year. All of these grievance applications that are filed at the Assessment Review Commission during the grievance period. That also begins the same day that the county publishes its brand new assessment roll. So the assessment roll that's published, it's called the tentative assessment roll, and it's tentative because it's subject to change based upon, these grievance applications. So as I said, the grievance period begins the same day, begins January 2nd. Normally, by law, it's supposed to end on the first day of business in March. So this year it would have been March 2nd, 2020. But we found out today that that's going to be extended to April 2nd of 2020. Once the grievance period closes, that's it. You don't have any rights to challenge this year's assessment roll. You'd have to wait until next year, wait for the new assessment roll, and wait for the grievance period. So it's very important to act during the grievance period. So as you can see, it says the last day to appeal, March 2nd. That's been amended to April 2nd. Once the grievance period closes, then the agencies that is receiving all of these grievance applications, the Nassau County Assessment Review Commission, has a very long period of time to review them. And they need that long period of time because last year they received about 200,000 residential grievance applications. And that's about 2/3 of all of the residential properties in Nassau County. So they have a very long period of time to review these grievance applications, and they don't actually start making decisions until around Labor Day. So after Labor Day, they start publishing their decisions, and anybody who files a grievance application will hear back from Assessment Review Commission. They actually have until next year, the end of March, to review all of the grievance applications that will be filed this year during the grievance period. So the same thing is true for those who filed last year. If you filed last year, people started getting decisions after Labor Day, but at this point you may not have heard, or you may not have a decision. They actually have until the end of March to finish the review process. As of April 1st, though, all of these tentative assessment rolls become final. But you have to wait until April of the following year for the assessment roll to become final. So last year's assessment roll, which was published January 2nd, 2019, actually won't become a final assessment roll until this year, April 1st, 2020. This year's assessment roll that was published this January won't become finalized until next April. That's because all of the changes that Assessment Review Commission will make during their review period will be applied to the assessment roll. April 1st is a very important date in the process. As I said, that's when the assessment roll goes from a tentative roll to a final roll, but also it opens up a period where people are allowed to appeal the decision that they get from Assessment Review Commission. So you will hear, as I said, the latest by the end of March. Everybody has a period where they could appeal the decision. So if you hear from Assessment Review Commission that they're not going to reduce your assessment, or they're going to reduce it to something you don't agree with, and you want to appeal that decision, you have a right to do that. Now, if you have a residential property, most likely you're going to be able to appeal through what they call the small claims assessment review process. And small claims assessment review is done in a part of the Nassau County Supreme Court. There's a special part just to hear these appeals. But in order to begin that process, you have to begin it in April after you get your decision from Assessment Review Commission. So that period never changes. That will never be extended. You only have the right to appeal your decision in April. After April 30th, that's really when budget season starts, and that's when the actual tax levies are created. The tax levies are the part of the budget that every taxing jurisdiction produces every single year. Begins with the school districts and the libraries, as you know, the third Tuesday in May. You vote on your school budget. So within those budgets are the tax levies. Once those tax levies are passed, they're actually transferred over back to Nassau County, to the Nassau County Department of Assessment. And they could actually begin the process of starting to create the tax rolls. So they'll wait until the assessment roll really has all of the changes that will be placed on it, including changes that could be made at the small claims assessment review process. But sometime by the end of September, they'll begin to start creating tax rolls. So the first tax rolls they create, for those of you who know, get tax bills directly from my office, those are the school tax bills. So the assessment roll that was created in January will be used the following year in October to create tax bills. So what that means, you have to think 2 years at a time. The assessment roll that was created last year, January 2nd, 2019, will finally be used to create tax rolls this year in 2020 in October. In the fall, the budgets are created for the county, the town, and all the county and town special districts. And then subsequent to the school tax bill, in January, you get the general tax bill. So that's basically how, the timeline of events, how these assessment rolls are used and when they will be used to create tax bills and tax rolls. We do get asked all the time about villages. Now, we collect the school taxes, including the libraries, and the general taxes, as I said, which are the county taxes, the town taxes, and the county and town special districts. We don't collect the village taxes. Villages are a separate, what they call assessing jurisdiction, so they have the right to do their own assessments and they do their own taxes. But you can appeal your village taxes as well. But it's the same process, but it's a much shorter time frame. So as you can see up on the screen, most of the villages in North Hempstead, we have 31 villages. We have half the villages in Nassau County. Most of the villages up there basically follow a similar calendar to the county, but it's condensed. The grievance period in villages begins February 1st, so it began already this year, and it only goes to the third Tuesday in February. So we're in the village grievance period now. So if you live in Westbury or in any one of those other villages, you can see that the grievance period began. It closes after third Tuesday in February, and the villages have to tell you whether or not they're going to reduce your assessment by the end of March. So if you don't agree with the village, you are allowed to file a small claims appeal, same process, in May. But those all have to be decided by the end of May, because in June the villages have tax rolls. They send out village tax bills, and they're due, as you know, by the 4th of July. So everything happens much faster in the villages. If you happen to live in one of these 5 villages in Great Neck, they do the exact same thing, but in the fall. And then there are several villages at the bottom of the screen that you can see. Most of them are in Manhasset. And then there's also Roslyn Harbor, North Hills. They actually just use the Nassau County assessment rolls. So if you live in those villages, by grieving the county assessment roll, you're also grieving the village taxes. So just so, as an overview, anyone who owns property and pays taxes in Nassau County has a right to file one of these grievance applications. As I said, these grievance applications are filed with the Nassau County Assessment Review Commission, or ARC for short, ARC. They're responsible for reviewing them. And they are a quasi-judicial body. So they do have the right to review these challenges and make changes to the assessment role. They have this judicial power. As I said before, there is a new assessment role every year, and the first thing you're going to want to know if you're going to do this process, you need to know what is this value that Nassau County Department of Assessment is assigned to your property. So the way you're going to find that out is that Nassau County Department of Assessment has been mailing out these notices of tentative assessed value. So they've been mailing out these notices for the 2021-2022 tax year. Remember I told you, tax roll is published in January. It's used for taxes the following October. And this year's assessment roll will be used to create tax rolls 2021, 2022. That's very important to remember because that information has to be on everything that you present back to Assessment Review Commission. So that's the first bit of very important information that you have to know. What is the value that's been assigned to your property for 2021, 2022? The county has, as I said, they've been mailing these notices out. Everybody was supposed to receive it by January 31st. If you didn't get it in the mail, we're going to show you how to find it online. It's been posted online since January 2nd, but you're going to need to see that. So in order to do this appeal, you have to file what's called this application of correction of assessment. And we've put them out on the chairs. You can see it's just a 2-page thing, but it does require certain information about your property. You are allowed to file this paper application, or you could file online. So we're going to show you how to do both. But before you do anything, we're going to take you through the whole process. You actually have to do a lot of research and have a lot of information. And the last thing you do really is your application. You don't start doing your application before you do the research. So we're going to show you how to check the Department of Assessment's records. And we're also going to show you how to check the Assessment Review Commission's website to get very important sales information that you most likely will need in order to fill out a complete application. So we're going to show you how to check certain things. We're going to show you how to check your inventory, which is very important. And we're also going to show you how to check sales, which is on the Assessment Review Commission website. Department of Assessment has one website and one website address. It's www.mynassauproperty.com. That address has been around for 20 years, and it's very important. So you're going to need to know that and be able to go there. And in a few minutes, we're going to show you how to easily get on the website and navigate it. For anybody who needs to check with Department of Assessment, you may find certain things when you're on their website that you want to check with them or you want to tell them about. And I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. They do have a dedicated phone number, which is 516-571-1500. So some basic information. You are allowed to file your application representing yourself. You don't have to hire an attorney or one of these property tax reduction firms. You are allowed to file for yourself. And one thing that these big firms who solicit us all the time and bombard us with these mailings, they don't tell you that you're allowed to file for yourself to the Assessment Review Commission, but if you don't agree with the decision and you want to file a formal small claims assessment review in Supreme Court, you're allowed to hire a representative or an attorney at that stage of the process. So people are actually free to do both. Now, the big firms don't like to take anybody to small claims if you haven't signed up with them for the first part, but there are attorneys and representatives out there that do it and will do it. So you need to keep that in mind. If you decide you're going to do it yourself and you've had a representative, you had a representative last year or recently, We highly recommend that you send a notice in writing to the representative, that you plan on doing it yourself, and also send a copy of that to the Assessment Review Commission. What's very important to remember is you don't want to have two applications pending in the same tax year. So again, we're in the 2021-2022 tax year. If you hired somebody, you shouldn't file for yourself, during this same tax year, or you don't want to hire two different firms. A duplicate filing will stop your application in its tracks until that's sorted out. They need to sort out who the representative is. So that most likely will put your application at the back of the line. And remember I said, there were 200,000 of these just residential appeals last year, so you don't want to be at the back of that line. So remember, no duplicate filings. What you should also know about this is that the Assessment Review Commission can really do one of two things. One, they could reduce your assessment, or two, they could leave it the way it is. They can't increase your assessment because you filed, and it doesn't trigger or automatically trigger any kind of field inspection or building inspection for them to come in and revalue your property. They can only do one or two things. So there really is no downside to filing, and it is very important to protect all of your rights every single year. So it is one of the reasons why there is such a high volume of these appeals every year in Nassau. The bigger reason is because, as everybody knows, the tax levies and the property taxes are very high, and there really is only two things you can do about it. One is to file one of these appeals and challenge your assessment, and the other is make sure you have all of the exemptions you're entitled to. The Assessment Review Commission can also take appeals during this grievance period regarding the tax class of your property. Now, I've been talking about residential properties. Most people who are looking into this are looking into this because of their residence. A residential property is considered a Class 1 property. That's a 1, 2, or 3 family home. So if you have a 1, 2, or 3 family home, you should be in tax Class 1. That's where most of the properties are. Class 2 properties are these big apartment houses that are mostly co-ops and condos now. Class 3 properties are all the public utilities, and Class 4 properties are all the commercial properties. So the Assessment Review Commission will take appeals now on all of the classes of properties. But if somebody thinks they're misclassified, that's important to get that corrected, and the first thing you have to do is file an appeal. They'll also hear cases regarding the denial of an exemption application. So for anybody who applied for an exemption last fall and got denied by Department of Assessment, you have the right to appeal that decision to Assessment Review Commission. It's very important to know that there are 3 separate forms and they look alike. It's important that you use the correct form. So if you have a residential property, and again, it's a Class 1 property, that's a 1, 2, or 3 family home, you have to use the form that says AR1. Those are the forms that we handed out that are on your chair. AR2 forms are for the other classes. AR3 forms are for anybody filing an appeal based upon they think they're misclassified in the wrong tax class, or because they were denied an exemption. If you need help from Assessment Review Commission with your application, you can reach them. They have a dedicated line for the public. It's 516-571-3214. They also have a very important website, which we're going to get to in a minute. There is a dedicated website address, which we're going to show you when we go to their website, but you can easily get to Assessment Review Commission just by going to Nassau County's webpage and then choosing departments and then choosing Assessment Review Commission. A couple of other things. You could look at the application. You can see there's only 6 sections there. They're only asking for certain specific information. However, you're allowed to provide additional information that may help your case, and many people do that. One example would be, people go out and pay for a fee appraisal. They have their own appraisal. So they'll choose to submit that with their grievance application. Other things may be, an example may be where a home is not in average condition. It may be in fair or poor condition because there may be some kind of structural problem or foundation problem. There may be cracks. Foundation may be sagging or sinking. And they have an engineer's report that could prove that. That would certainly affect the market value of their property. They'll submit that. People submit architectural plans to show that their inventory is misclassified and incorrect and needs to be corrected, which might be causing their property to be overvalued. There may be some sort of environmental problem going on around their property or immediately in their neighborhood. And people submit all kinds of information, and you can do that with the paper application, or you can do it online if you use the online application. So you can send Word documents, photographs, or if you're doing it online, digital photographs, scanned images. What's very important if you're doing attachments is make sure you put, obviously, your name and address. If you're submitting more than one page, number the pages. Make sure you put tax year 21-22. And the last thing that you have to put there is your section, block, and lot. Section, block, and lot is something you have to know if you're going to go ahead and file a grievance application. It has to be on your grievance application. I'm going to show you a few ways to find that in a second. But, as I said, the last thing you want to do in this process is the actual application. So the first thing you want to do is you want to do all the work and all the research that we're going to show you how to do in a minute. And the first thing that you're going to determine after you do all this research is your lower estimated market value. And it's going to be based on sales. So after you do all this work, in the end, you're going to come up with a value. It's going to be a counter value, like a counter offer. And it always has to be lower than the value that Nassau County Department of Assessment is assigned to your property. And you're going to have to back it up with what they call substantial evidence. So we're going to show you how that's possible and how you can do that. But you're going to need to know that information before you begin your application. We're going to get into how to search for sales and how to compare sales in a little while. But we just, I want to reiterate again that you can do this with the paper application or you can file online. If you're using the paper application, you could do one of two ways. You could either bring it to Nassau County Assessment Review Commission, and that's at 240 Old Country Road on the 5th floor. That's the best way to hand in or to file a paper application. If you're doing that, what we recommend is you make a copy of everything you're going to give them. Bring both the original and the copy and give it to them. They'll stamp them both. They'll keep the original, give you back a stamped copy, and that's your receipt. You are allowed to mail in your application as long as you mail it in by the due date. And it has to be postmarked by the due date. However, if you're mailing it, you really have to mail it with tracking. Best way to do it is certified mail, return receipt requested. They don't send receipts if you're mailing it. So you don't want to get into some kind of problem with that next year, where you said you actually filed and they say we have no record of anything you ever sent. If you could just hold that thought for a minute, thank you. But you are going to answer the questions on the form, on the application, whether you do it paper or you do it online. So we're going to begin. That was the preamble. We're going to begin. And as I said, really what we want to do is get all the information, show you how to do that, and then in the end, you are ready to do the application. So as I said a little while ago, the first thing you want to know is what's this value that was assigned to your property. Everybody should have received this 2021-2022 notice. of tentative assessment. It will also tell you what tax class you're in. These are normally correct. Very few mistakes here. But again, if you have a 1, 2, or 3 family home, you should be in tax class 1. If for some reason it says tax class 2, those are completely different rates and you need to get that corrected. You're going to look at your notice of tentative assessed value. The important information is in the middle of the page. There's 2 valuation dates, this year and last year. And it's going to show you what the valuation was on January 2nd, 2019, and the valuation on January 2nd, 2020. The average increase for residential properties this year was about 3%. But that varies depending upon what assessment neighborhood you're in and how much they've determined values have increased over the last 12 months. But the average seems to be about 3%. Underneath the value, which is what you're challenging, that's the estimated market value, and you're actually going to come up with a lower estimated value to do this process. Underneath that, you can see a fraction. The fraction actually says 1/10 of 1%. That's the fraction of the market value that's actually being taxed. That number will be on the tax bill. It's one of 2 factors that determines the tax amount and the billed amount. And that's a function of the market value. So they're using now a fraction, 1/10 of 1%. Before they did annual reassessment, that was frozen at 1/4 of 1%, and it was at that number since 2007. That was the main reason why these grievance applications were so successful year after year, and actually over time it became easier and easier to file a successful challenge. The challenge wasn't to the market value. Most of the assessed values were lower than the actual real estate market, and almost nobody could find sales to back up their case. What the grievance was about was whether or not that 1/4 of 1% was correct. Now, I used to spend half the night explaining that to everybody, and if you want to go back in time, it's memorialized. You know, you could find it on YouTube, any one of these presentations before last year. But we're not going to get into that tonight because they've actually eliminated that part of the grievance application. So it's really, there's 1 or 2 things you can challenge, either excessive value or an unequal assessment based upon that fractional level of assessment. They've pretty much eliminated the second challenge for the time being, so the focus, the emphasis is on excessive value. So we're going to concentrate on that and on sales. So you do need to know the market value that was assigned to your property, and that you will find on the notice of tentative assessment. If you don't have the paper, we're going to show you how to look that up online in a few minutes. Now remember, I said a few minutes ago that you do need to know your section, block, and lot to do a grievance application. The one way you can find that is on your tax bill. If you get a tax bill directly from me, if you don't have a mortgage on your property, or you could look it up online. Your section, block, and lot is going to be on your tax bill. It's also on your deed. And it is a good idea to pull out your deed if you're going to do your own grievance application, because there is a question about ownership information. So essentially, you know, you're ready to look at the application now, and then we're going to go through the different sections, but we're really going to get into both of the websites because it's the websites where you're going to find the information you're going to need to do the application. So the first part of the application, you could see we handed it out. It's on the screen. It'll say AR1, and it'll also say the correct tax year, 2021, 2022. Make sure you don't have last year's application. It is similar, except for Part B. They had 1 or 2 questions last year that were confusing that thankfully they eliminated, but it's almost identical, but make sure you have the right tax year, because on a technicality, they could throw out your grievance application. So you have to make sure you're using the correct form, AR1, and it says tax year 2021, 2022. So on Part A, the first question they're going to ask, general information. They ask you, what's the section, block, and lot of the property you're filing the grievance for? If you live in a condo, there are two more numbers beyond section, block, and lot. One is the CA number, which is a number that identifies the condo within Nassau County, and then the unit number, the unit that within the condo. So you do need to know that information. And again, it's on your tax bill. We're going to show you on mynassauproperty.com how you can find it, but you are going to need to know that. You obviously need to know the property's address, and it's very important. Put the complete address, including city, state, and zip code. And then there's a question about the owner information. So you have to put the correct owner, the ownership, the name on the deed, that's the owner. If it's in one name, put one name. If it's in two names, put two names. If it's in a trust, you just skip a line and you put the other owner's name, the name of the trust, or the life estate, if it's in a life estate. But make sure, it's accurate and it reflects what's on your deed. So Part A, it's pretty straightforward. Part B is mandatory. Part B has to do with your lower estimated value. So let me say a few things about lower estimated value. We're going to show you how to actually try to calculate that and figure that out. But number one, your value has to be lower than the value that Nassau County Department of Assessment is assigned to your property. It should be lower by 5% because sometimes they build in a margin of error of 5%, and if you're within 5% or less, you may have a greater chance of having your grievance application not looked at and denied. Also, the number that you put there, you're locked into it. So in other words, Assessment Review Commission will never go lower than the number you state as your lower estimated value. The same thing is true, if you go to the next step and you file a small claims assessment review and you go to SCAR, you're locked into your lower estimated value. That's the value that you're trying to defend with some substantial evidence. So it's a very important number. So you're actually going to come back and do Part B after you've done all of your work. Now, for those of you who've did this in the last decade, the decade of the teens, you know that sales were very hard to find. You really only had to worry about the fact that your lower estimated value had to be lower than the county's assessment, and there was some pretty easy ways to come up with a lower value. Many people just did what the experts did, which was take the county's value and divide by 2. You can't do that anymore. You have to be able to justify what your lower estimated value is with, again, what they call substantial evidence of, in most cases, it's going to be sales. So they ask another question in Part B, you have to answer it. So Part B is mandatory. If you turn in an application and leave Part B out, automatically disqualified. And Part B is mandatory. They ask the second question, has the property been sold or offered for sale or under contract in the past 12 months? So you have to answer that either yes or no. And if it's a yes, they want to know the price. Now, a couple of more things about estimated value. We're going to show you the whole sales approach and how to use the county's, the Assessment Review Commission's sales locator program to actually analyze sales and possibly create, a lower value. However, some of this may have to do with the condition of your home. The condition of your home is important, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. And that's also part of what they call your property's inventory, or the record that Department of Assessment has on file for your property. In most cases, they deem that the properties are in average condition, but that may not be true in certain cases. And if your home does have certain problems that would put you in a fairer or poor condition, the way to weigh that and to add that to your into your calculation of lower estimated value would be, look at a home in typical condition in your neighborhood and try to determine the market value for that home, and then deduct how much it would cost repair work to do on your home to get it into that typical condition. So that will give you a certain amount of market value to deduct when you're coming up with your estimate, that you could actually would be part of your presentation, part of your grievance application. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to compare sales, but this is very important for Class 1 condos. Class 1 condos, you really have to try to find sales in your condo first. And then if you're trying to compare condos to homes, it becomes a little more difficult. And again, as you can see at the bottom of the page, just remember in Part B, Assessment Review Commission will never reduce your value for more than you state in Part B, and neither will the Small Claims Assessment Review. Part C has to do with you telling the Assessment Review Commission who's representing the grievance application. So if you're representing yourself, this is where you would check self, and you put in your name, your address, and all of your contact phone numbers. Your cell phone number or numbers. If you have a landline, you put that in, and certainly your email address. This part is mandatory, but it's also very important because what we're seeing, based upon what happened last year, based upon the challenges of 2019, is that, number one, Assessment Review Commission has denied a large percentage of the grievance applications. However, for people who have submitted applications with evidence, you get a chance to actually tell the Assessment Review Commission whether or not you agree with their decision, whether or not you accept it. If you send it back and tell them you don't accept it, what we're seeing is most likely they're going to reach out to you. They're going to contact you. They want to talk to you about it and talk to you about your grievance application. And you have a chance one-on-one to talk with Assessment Review Commission. And what we're seeing is a lot of people in that scenario have been successful in getting Assessment Review Commission to reduce their values. And most likely, this hasn't changed. Assessment Review Commission doesn't really want people going to the next step, to the Small Claims Assessment Review. So they seem to be very active, very proactive in coming up with some kind of settlement. And people are being offered anywhere from 6 to 12% reduction from what they were assessed for last year. After they were initially offered zero. So this settlement part of the process is, they used to do it in the beginning of the County Executive Mangano Plan, which began in 2010, and then they started phasing it out. But now it's back, and it's back in a big way last year. A lot of people, this is very important. If you get a letter from the Assessment Review Commission and you denied a reduction, don't accept the decision, don't accept it. Send back their letter indicating that you don't agree with the decision. As long as your application has been submitted with evidence of sales or possibly additional evidence, they're going to call you and want to talk to you. If they look at your application and you simply just do parts A, B, and C, and in Part B you've made up, an imaginary lower value that you can't back up, and you leave out the other parts and you sign it, that's a valid application. But if they see you have no evidence, they're probably not going to worry as much about it. But if you submit your application with sales and with other evidence, they're going to take that seriously. So even if they deny you initially, which, as I can tell you, the great majority of grievance applications were denied. So, it's not like the past decade where there were years where 92% of these grievance applications were reduced. It averaged over the 8 or 9 years about 78%. Now we're in a completely different place. They believe that the values that they started with, that they came up with in reassessment, are accurate or fairly accurate or can be defended, which is what they want to do. So they're not reducing these grievance applications ad hoc anymore. So, but they are interested in talking to people who don't want to accept their decision. So a large majority will be denied, but also for the people who don't accept their decision, a large percentage of them have been contacted already. And from what we know, from the people that we've been in contact with, a lot of those people have gotten reductions from 2019 assessed values. So, this is an important process. It seems to be a 3-step process now, but there is certainly a fairly good chance of getting a reduction. It seems to be working. So, it's a long process, but, our advice is to hang in there and be proactive. So anyway, if you look at the bottom of the front page, you come to the next part, Part D. So this part is optional, but this part is going to be used when you look at the Nassau County Department of Assessment's website. We're going to show you how to thoroughly get into that in a few minutes. If you find a mistake on your inventory, this is a section of the application where you're going to indicate that. Now the inventory, we're going to show you the actual inventory, and you're going to see it has many factors. All those factors are very important in determining your assessment. Because what assessment is they're trying to identify the market value of your property, and the way they do it is by using sales. So what they do is, your home is a subject of the assessment, and they find 5 homes that sold that are supposed to be similar to yours that have sold somewhat recently. And their program is supposed to make some adjustments for the differences between your home and each home that sold. So they do that 5 different times. They come up with 5 different adjusted market values, and then they pretty much take an average of those adjusted market values and identify that as your assessment. Now, the sales that they use, and we're going to show you how to look at them, and you're all going to have to look at the sales that we use to determine your assessment. Those homes are supposed to have a very similar inventory to your home. So that's why, number one, it's going to be very important to look at your inventory and understand it and make sure it's correct. And then number 2, you're going to look at the inventories of these homes that they use to determine your assessments. So if you find an inventory problem, you're going to identify it here in Part D. Now, if you start this part or you do any part of this, you don't have to do the entire part. You only have to do the part that you're trying to show them that you're overvalued based on inventory. Now, it's very important, if you do find an inventory problem, you're going to put it on your application to the Assessment Review Commission. Assessment Review Commission is not going to transfer this information back to Department of Assessment for future assessments. It's up to you to actually contact Department of Assessment to let them know that they have a mistake in your inventory. You might be able to prove it with documentation, or you may request them to come to your house for a field inspection. And if in fact they've made a mistake and you could show them, they will change your inventory, and that will affect your assessment going forward. But this is a part of the application that has to do with inventory. It's also the part of the application where you can add attachments. So remember I told you earlier that you're allowed to add attachments to your grievance application, that they're not asking you everything that might help your case, certainly just a 2-page thing. So this is where you would do it. If you have a paper application, you would number your attachments, and as I said, put your name and address, your section, block, and lot, and make sure you put the correct tax year, 2021, 2022. So if you have 5 or 6 or 7 pages you want to send, you can't put them at the bottom of Part D. Part D, the last thing it asks are other facts. Those are the attachments. So you would simply write, see attached, and then attach them. But make sure you do it the way I explained. So Part D is very important. It does have to do with inventory, and your whole grievance may be based upon an inaccurate inventory. You're not going to know until you look at this, and the way you find this is on the Nassau County Department of Assessment's webpage, and that again is www.mynassauproperty.com. So you go to that address, it's going to bring you to the home page. On the home page, they have a security screen. So security screen is very, very annoying. They'll show you, some images, some panes, window panes, and they'll ask you questions about which window pane has a bicycle or a street sign or something. And then there'll be another set of questions. They'll show you words and script, and you have to tell them what the word is. They might show you a word that you could hardly figure out because it's elongated. Anyway, they're trying to make sure that whoever's using the website isn't a robot data mining the website for information. But there is a way to get around this. Going through the security part is very inefficient, and it's not going to help you do research. Because as I said, you're going to want to at least research the homes that were used to determine your assessment, but you may also want to look at other assessments throughout your, on your street, on your neighboring streets, in your development, or in your school district, or elsewhere in your community. So in order to do that, you really need to set up an account with this website. So there's no instructions about how to do that, so we're going to tell you how to do it. If you can see, there's a toolbar up there, and in very small letters, it's pretty small on your screen. At the end of the toolbar, it does say login. Now, you can't log in unless you establish an account. The way to do that is click that login, and first thing you'll see is to put in your username and password, but underneath that, it'll say create an account. Yes, that's what you want to do. So the first thing you do is create an account. It simply will ask you what username and password do you want to use, and what is your email address. You just have to have an email address to create an account with this. Once you do that, you submit it, you click submit, and then you'll get an email back from them, from mynassauproperty.com, saying you've established an account. Now you can go back to the home page, click login, put in your username and password, and then you can get to the search screen. Once you're signed in, you can do as many searches as you want, which is what you want. So you want to create an account with mynassauproperty.com. On the search screen, they're going to ask you, what property do you want to search for? First, you want to start with yours. So you can search either by section, block, and lot, or your property's address. So again, if you know your section, block, and lot, you should know it. Just put it in. If you don't know it yet, put in your property's address, put in the number of your property, just put in the name of your street. Don't add, whether it's an avenue, a place, a turnpike, a boulevard. Just the first name of your street, and then put in your mailing address, your town, where your post office is, and your zip code, and click search. That should bring you to the home page of your property. You'll know you're there most likely because you'll see a picture of your house. So that's your home page. There's all the important information about your home is on this, can be found by using this home page on mynassauproperty.com. This is what Department of Assessment has on file for your property. They're the ones who did your assessment. So the first thing above the picture, it says View Correspondence. So that's where you're going to find your notice of tentative value if you haven't got it in the mail yet. So remember, everybody should have gotten it by last Friday, January 31st. But if you didn't, it's been posted online on this website since January 2nd, so you need to find it and print it out. Next to that is a very important feature. It says area maps. Area maps, if you click that, it's going to bring you to a map of your neighborhood. It's going to have your street and various other properties. You could click any one of those other parcels, and that'll bring you to the home page of that parcel. And you can actually see the assessment value for the neighboring parcel. So as you can see, so area maps is a very, very nice feature to use. Everybody should try it and get familiar with it. But it helps you view neighboring assessments. You can see all the values on this home page for your home. You can see this year's value. It'll say 2021, 2022. And then you'll see last year's value. You'll even see the values from the previous 2 years before that when they were using the different fractional level of assessment. So most likely those market values will be much lower than the new market values because those were the frozen old values. Even for people who never filed a grievance during the whole 8 or 9 years, in almost every case, their frozen value is still lower than the new market value based upon the new reassessment from last year. So you can see all that information on your home page. Also, at the bottom of the page, you can view the history, the grievance application history for the property. So if you're a new owner or a newer owner, you want to see what the previous owner did, you can click that, and you can look back and see all the grievances and what happened, whether or not they were settled and reduced. But most importantly, right above the values, there's a couple of very important tabs. You should look at all of them. But most importantly, what we're going to get into now is property description. That's the inventory. And then the last tab at the end, which we'll come back to and we'll click that, it says prognosis. Prognosis is the program that Nassau County Department of Assessment uses to actually do assessments. And prognosis will show you the homes that we use to create your assessment. So all that information can be found by going to your home page on mynassauproperty.com. As I've been discussing in Part D, because Part D and Part E are the two most important parts. So Part D has to do with inventory. You click that, and that's going to bring you to what they call your property record card or your inventory. And there's some very important, all the information there is very important, and you're going to go through it, make sure it's all accurate. First thing is it will identify the tax year. I think this one is from last year, but it will identify the tax year. It's also going to tell you what the lot size is of your property. That's a very important feature. It has to be accurate. You know, if you have a half an acre and they're stating that you have a 2-acre property, most likely they might be pulling sales to do your assessment based on other properties that are on 2 acres. So lot size has to be accurate. Also, the style of the home. There are different models of homes. As you know, there are ranches, there are split ranches, split level, colonials, there are even mansions. You want to make sure this is accurate because in almost every case, they should be pulling homes that are the same model as your home. So you want to make sure the style is accurate. Underneath that, you can see where it says CDU. The CDU is the condition of the home. It means condition, desirability, and utility. Most of them just say average. But if you know that your home is not average, it's below average because some of the conditions exist that I talked about earlier, that has to be corrected. So number one, you would show that on your grievance application, and number two, you're going to go back to Department of Assessment. The grade, they give every property a grade. The grade is kind of generated from the condition, and the grade and the condition need to be compatible. You know, if they're not compatible, if you have like an average home and a high grade, like an A or an X, they have grade X for mansions, then something's wrong. That could change in this evaluation anywhere from 15 to 25%. So you do have to make sure that's accurate. It'll state the year the home was built. It'll state whether or not the home has central heat only or central air, which is a taxable improvement. So that should be accurate. And then on the other side of the page, the next column at the top, it says total living area. That has to be accurate. Because most likely they're pulling homes that have the same square footage or identical square footage or almost the same square footage as your home. If it's saying that your total living area is 3,000 square feet and you know that you have under 2,000 square feet, you're going to look at the homes that they use to do your assessment. Most likely they have more square footage of living space. Square footage of living space is the most important factor of all the factors, so that really has to be accurate. It's also telling you how many bathrooms are there, whether or not there's a finished basement, a finished attic, whether or not there's a pool, rec room, if there's an attached garage, a detached garage, decks, porches, etc. Those are all very important factors. You need to check that out. And as I said, the next thing you're going to do after you check that out is you are going to go back into mynassauproperty.com, look at the homes that we used to create your assessment, and then look at their property record card. So you want to get a comparison, you want to compare. Because if they're, if the property record card is of those homes is greatly different from yours, or if they've made a mistake on yours and have pulled sales that really aren't the same as yours, you have a very good case to file this grievance. And again, if you find any of these problems, you do want to get that corrected with the Nassau County Department of Assessment. The next slide that we're going to show you is basically if you click the bottom of the home page, you want to see the grievance history. That's basically what it looks like. As far as we know, there aren't any grievance settlements up there from 2019, only from what they consider the tax roll that was published in 2019, which is the 2020-2021 tax year. They're only showing the tax rolls that were published, the assessment rolls that were published in 2018 for the 2019-2020 year, which is the current tax bill that we're in right now. But you can see that, especially if you're a new owner. So going back to the home page, after you've checked your inventory, you want to check prognosis. Those are the two most important things to do on this website. You want to look at the sales that we use to create your assessment. And again, you want to take a really close look at it. The first thing you want to see is what are the sales dates that they used. The sales date is very important. The closer the sales date is to the day they publish the assessment roll, the more accurate it's viewed to be. The further away the sales date is from the date they publish the assessment roll, the more suspect it is, the more open it is to challenge and to question. So you want to take a very close look at the sales date. On this one, there's a sale in 2016. There's even a sale in 2015. This is for a prognosis from this year. So that was, as you know, some time ago. A lot's happened in the market. What they do is they take the sale number and then they time trend it. They adjust it for time based upon how much the values have risen in that assessment neighborhood over time, and they apply that adjustment factor to it, and then they come up with a new time-adjusted sales price, and then from the time-adjusted sales price, they may adjust it again to an adjusted sales price. But they're using these adjusted sales prices to actually come up with your assessment. So you want to take a look at the date of the sale. Another important thing about date of the sale, as I explained, the closer it is to the date the assessment roll was published, or what they call the taxable status date, the more accurate the sale is. And it's very important to look at this. Now, you're allowed and you will be able to put sales on your grievance application, and we're going to show you how to go through the process and do that and find sales. But you may actually, by next year, next April, you may have more sales that will be helpful than you could find right now. It may be harder to find sales that happened at the end of December. But next year, you'll probably be able to find sales that happened in November, December of 2019, and maybe even sales that happened after January 2nd, 2020. Those sales may not help you with the Assessment Review Commission, the 2020 sales, but they certainly will help you in the next step with ARC. So if you find those sales, if you get into a settlement situation with the Assessment Review Commission, you could tell them you have even more evidence than you submitted to them when you submitted during the grievance period, more sales evidence. But the better sales are closer to the date the assessment roll was published, the date of the tentative assessment roll, or what they call the taxable status date. Remember, it's January 2nd, 2020. So look at the sales of the homes that we use to create your assessment. We're going to show you how to actually find sales to do the next part of the application now. But as you could, know by this point, your application is really based on two things. One, you have an inventory issue with the Department of Assessment, and you're going to show the Assessment Review Commission that. Or two, you're going to state and you're going to feel that you were overvalued, excessive valuation, and that you're going to come up with a sales, or what they could call a comparative market analysis, to show that you should have a lower assessment based upon your lower estimated value. So in comparing sales, we're going to look for sales in your neighborhood that are lower than the county's full market value that they placed on your property. You're going to try to find as many sales as you can. So the application, the paper application, gives you room to put 3 sales. 3 sales is the minimum for your case. Better come up with 5 or 6. I think the computer application, the computer program allows you 5, but the more sales you have that are going to help you prove your case, in most respects, the better your case will be. So if you find more than 3 sales, you want to list them on a separate sheet. Again, you're going to submit it as an attachment. For attachments, put your name, your address, your section, block, and lot, and make sure you put tax year 2021, 2022. We're going to show you in a minute how to use the Assessment Review Commission's website. Best way right now to find sales, to do this yourself and to do your case, is by using the Assessment Review Commission's website to the Assessment Review Commission to challenge the Nassau County Department of Assessment. So that's essentially where we are, and we're going to show you that in a minute. But you are going to firstly use their website. And in choosing sales, you're going to want to make sure that, again, you're comparing sales, the same house style. We showed you how to find the style of your house. It should be correct. And also the other characteristics on the inventory, and within the same school district. So you can go outside to a comparable school district, but within the same school district, you're going to have a stronger case. So the sales part of the application is the next part, Part E. So before you do this part of the application, we're going to show you how to find sales. And as I said, you're going to do all the work first, then do the application last. But you are going to find sales. Now this part is optional, but most likely you're not going to be able to create a satisfactory application that's going to get anywhere without doing this part. So unless your entire grievance is based upon inventory, you are going to want to do this sale, this part of the application, and show them recent sales at comparable houses. It does say optional there, but at this point in time, it used to be very optional. We used to tell most people don't even worry about it. That was before last year. Now we're saying this is really the essence of the whole grievance application. But again, you're going to only want to use sales that will help your case. The last part of the grievance application, it needs a signature, so you do have to sign it. You have to date it and sign it. Print the name of your name if you're filing pro se. Pro se means you're filing representing yourself. Or you do have the opportunity to file as a representative for a parent, but you do need an authorization. So if you're filing as a representative, you have to have a letter of authorization, or there's a form that you can print out from the Assessment Review Commission's grievance application program. It's called the AR-10 form, but it's an authorization form. So whoever is filing, if you're filing for yourself, you're going to indicate you're the owner. You're going to check that at the bottom. And if you're filing as an authorized representative with the authorization, you're going to click that. You're going to check that. But you do have to do Part F. You do have to sign it, or else they'll throw out the grievance application. So Part F is mandatory. So getting to Assessment Review Commission and their website, you have to go there. And especially if you are going to file the grievance application online, this is how you do it. But you want to go to the Assessment Review Commission. Remember I said you could go to any department through the Nassau County's homepage, but they have a website that goes right there. It's www.nassaucountny.gov/ARC or ARC. So once you go to Assessment Review Commission's homepage, make sure you have all the information that you need from Department of Assessment first. And you may want to print all of that out. But to use this to actually file a grievance application, you have to set up a username and password with Assessment Review Commission. So we're going to show you how to do that in a minute. So you go to that address, www.nassaucountny.gov/ARC, and that's going to bring you to Assessment Review Commission's homepage. So this is a brand new thing that they have this year for us that nobody knows about unless you're using it. They have a tutorial on their website how to file a grievance application. And a lot of it has to do with what I've said, with what I've been saying up to now and what I said last year. So the people in my office think that they watched my presentation last year and then they created this tutorial. But anyway, this is very good. It's a very good tutorial. Before you do your grievance application, as part of your work, watch the tutorial. This is brand new. They never had it before. It's going to help you a lot. So watch the tutorial. Also, as you may have noticed, cameras in the back. That's North Hempstead Television. So they're recording this tonight as well. So everybody else will be able to watch this between now and April 2nd. So I thank you for your help and your participation. So if the people don't know about the tutorial, but they watch this on the website, they'll now know about the tutorial. So watch the tutorial first. This is the home page. And on the left-hand side of the home page of the Assessment Review Commission, you can see there are different places you can go and you can click. Most importantly, ARROW stands for Assessment Review on the Web. That's where you go to file your grievance application, and it's also where you're going to go to check sales, to look for sales. So this is the first place you want to go to find sales is Assessment Review Commission. There are also some other websites which we're going to just show you, name. I'm not going to show you how they work, but you can try those websites as well, but you may have to subscribe to get any useful information. But Assessment Review Commission's website it's free. It's open to everyone. So you can watch the tutorial first, and then you could use their sales program to find sales. So once you click ARROW, A-R-O-L, remember from the Assessment Review Commission's main website, ARROW has a home page. And this is where you could file your appeal online. It also has a nice feature where if you're filing online, it lets you check the status of your appeal, so you're not in the dark. You know, if you're filing paper, you just have to wait for them to get back to you. But if you're filing online, you can check the status of your appeal. You also can, you'll get an electronic receipt, which is a good thing. So there's several things here that you can do on the ARROW homepage, including filing your appeal online. But before you do your application, again, before you do any application, you have to do all this research. So the first place you should go on the ARROW main menu, and this is the left side of it, is the sales locator. So we have the 1 and the 2 up there. That's after you've checked sales. And the first thing you need to do is go to the sales locator because you need sales for your application. And the best place to get them right now is from Assessment Review Commission. So you don't even have to create an account with them to use this feature. You could simply go to Assessment Review Commission, go to ARROW, look at the main menu of ARROW, and on the left-hand side, click Sales Locator. And there are, as I said, there are other options on ARROW which you can explore. And we're going to show you in a minute, if you want to file an appeal online, you do need to register with the Assessment Review Commission. But the first thing you need to do is click the Sales Locator. Once you click the Sales Locator, you're going to come up to a search screen. So you're going to search for your property. You want to put your property in there. You're going to do essentially your own assessment of your property based upon sales that Assessment Review Commission is going to give you. So you want to search for your property. So you can do that, again, either with your property's address or hopefully with your section, block, and lot. So either way, put in the information and click search at the top there of the search box. Click search. Once you click that, the program wants to just make sure you're not a robot. You're not data mining the program for sales. So it brings you to this screen where they actually show you something simple. They show you a black box. It highlights five letters of the alphabet. You have to type that into the box. Put your cursor in that box and then type in the letters that you see. But before you do that, as you can see on this page, there's a link, there's a hot link there, and it says, click this link to read tips on how to use the sales locator or the sale locator. Click it. It's going to give you 3 pages of very, very good information about this program. So really, to maximize the use of this program, you want to read the instructions. So the way to get the instructions, they have a little link there, and basically not really telling you about it. It's there, but I'm telling you, click that link, print out the 3 pages of instructions, read the instructions about this program. This program, most likely will be very valuable. Once you do that, type in the letters that you see that are highlighted in that black box, and then just click continue. That's going to bring you to a page that's similar to mynassauproperty.com. That's going to show your house. It's going to show your picture. It's going to have a lot of the information on there that's on mynassauproperty.com. At the bottom there, you can see a link that says Find Sales. So that's what you want to do. You want to click Find Sales. So underneath the picture, underneath the dwelling information, it says Find Sales. Click that. Click Find Sales. Once you do that, you're going to get what's called a run from them. Now, a run for your house could be 1 page, it could be 2 pages, it could be 3 pages. So to get the feel for this, to get the hang of it, you really should look for 3 sales that you think are going to help your case and click them. And then you're going to click Submit. So you're going to click 3 sales, you're going to click Submit, and what it's going to give you is something that looks similar to what you saw in Prognosis. It's going to give you an assessment. And it's going to basically tell you what the arrow sales locator says your assessment, your weighted adjusted sales price should be based on the sales that you selected on your run. And then it's also going to show you what your assessed value is, what your market value is. So first time we clicked it, we're starting to get the feel of it, get used to it. We clicked sales, and then we wanted to see what would happen. We clicked sales that didn't work. They didn't help us. So the sales that we clicked basically came up with a weighted adjusted sales price of $547,282. Our assessment is $461,000. It's higher than our assessment. Obviously, you can't use it in Part B. It's not going to help your case. So we went back to the run, and we found more sales. This time we found more sales. We found 5 sales, and we actually came up with an assessment from the Assessment Review Commission. Thank you for redoing our assessment. And the assessment that they came up with is lower than the value that was given to us by the Nassau County Department of Assessment. Basically computes, and it does all the adjustments for you within this program. It adjusts everything. It adjusts, as I mentioned, the date of the sale and the time trending, the time adjustment that you need when you're looking at sales. And it also adjusts for certain factors of the property. The square footage, if it's not identical, the number of bathrooms, certain other features. So it's doing the whole assessment for you. And it's just coming up with a final answer. So here, you can see it worked. Assessment Review Commission came up with an assessment for us of $437,000. We're assessed at $461,000. We could just go ahead and use these sales or reduce further if we feel that there's some inventory issues or some other issues, or based upon other factors that we presented as attachments. But something that you could back up, and it has to be rational. But this sales locator program worked great for this house. Now, it may be for your house, you're only going to get a run of 1 page, and it may not work. You may keep coming up with assessments from Assessment Review Commission that are as high or maybe even higher than your assessment. So that's not going to work. So actually what you need to do is use another home as a subject. And what you're going to do, this is what we want you to do. You can only hear this if you come to my presentation, so thank you. But this is what may and can and will give you the strongest chance. Look at the homes that Prognos used to create your assessment and use each one of those as your subject of the sales locator, and look at the run that was generated from those other homes. So each home, now you have 5 homes that Department of Assessment Review used to create your assessment. And you could use each one of those homes to create a run. And you actually want to look at those sales as well, because those sales will help you with the Assessment Review Commission, and they will help you in a SCAR hearing. So you may actually put together the correct combination of sales that's going to help your case. So don't, great if your run works using your home as a subject and you're happy with the number, you may just be able to go ahead and use that. It doesn't automatically mean that Assessment Review Commission is going to go down to that number, although that's what they're saying the value should be. But it doesn't automatically mean they're going to do that. But you're not going to accept a denial from this. And once they contact you, you're going to tell them that you have their sales. And, you consider their sales better than assessment sales in identifying what your assessment should be. And most likely, they'll agree with that. So, but you can use the sales locator, but don't stop just at your house. Use all the homes that we use in creating your assessment and do a run for all of them. So as I said, it's very important to identify these homes that we use to create your assessment and use them to your advantage, because what you're challenging is not just, the final value that assessment put on your property, but the process, and how they got there with the sales that they used. And there really is, a good likelihood and a good opportunity to counteroffer and to file a counter case. We didn't know last year when we started doing these presentations based upon the new reassessment what would happen, but now we have real information from last year based upon what's happening. So we strongly suggest you use Sales Locator to come up with a lower estimated value. Now you're in good shape to do Part B. So, you have that information, you have the Sales Locator information, you have the inventory information. We have a slide that actually, this is all in the tutorial. It's a little blurry because we tried to freeze it. That's a freeze from the tutorial on the Assessment Review Commission. But I have to say, Assessment Review Commission, the county is being very helpful right now, helping us to file, a grievance application against the county. This is more helpful than they've been and ever been. The only problem is nobody knows. Nobody knows yet about this. I want to get this out there, and I'll probably, try to explain it to the press. But now we're explaining it to you, and we're recording it, and it's going to be, online and on YouTube. So, everybody pay attention. This is important stuff. As I mentioned, if you want to go beyond the Sales Locator to look for sales, you have to have sales. There are other websites to look at. There's Trulia. There's the MLSLI. There's also Zillow.com. But to get the useful information to do market value, comparative market assessments, you most likely have to subscribe to these websites, and pay them a fee to use their websites. Also, some people have reached out because they know or have contacts with real estate professionals. They're getting sales from those real estate professionals. Now, the program's a lot easier to use if you use your run. If you use your run, you could just click them into your application. If you're using the run from the homes that we use to create your assessment, it doesn't allow you to click, cut, and paste them into your application. You'd have to type them all in, or if you're doing a paper application, you just, write them in, the first 3 onto your paper application, and then write in the additional sales. But either way, you want to submit your sales. And again, as I said, they're asking for 3 on the paper application. You should have 6, 5 or 6. Strongly recommend that. But once you have done all this research on mynassauproperty.com and done the sales research on the Assessment Review Commission's website, you can, go back and do the Part A, B, C, D, and E, and F. Do the application. For anybody who wants to file the application online and not use the paper, we strongly, after you do all your work first, you do the application last, remember. Once you do all the work and you're ready to go, even if you're going to go online, we suggest you do a paper application first, kind of as practice, but have it in front of you when you go to do the application online. The online application, I mentioned some of the features. It does allow you to check the status. It does give you a receipt. There's also a feature where you're allowed to go in and make revisions up until the due date, up until the termination date, which is now going to be April 2nd. And I have to say that people who started using the online application, they really liked it, and they switched from paper to online. But either one works just as well. You don't get an advantage if you're doing the online versus the paper. For anybody who wants to file online, go back to the Arrow homepage after you're all done with the sales locator. And the first thing you have to do is register with this website. So you have to register with Assessment Review Commission. This is on the Arrow main menu. So you click that. It brings you to a registration page. On the registration page, you have to put in your name, your address, phone number, all your numbers, who's representing, what your email address is. Right, it sounds familiar. That's the same questions that are on Part C. Once you register with ARC, you're actually completing Part C of your application first. It's going to ask you, just like the other website, create a username and password. And then all you simply have to do is you have to have an email address, of course. And then what you do is just complete registration. Once you're registered, you get a confirmation to your email address. Then you can go ahead and open up the application. So you can file the appeal online. If you find all your sales from your run, you could simply electronically transfer those sales into your application. I think it allows more than 3. I think it allows 5. But if you find other sales that are going to help your case, meaning other sales from using your run or using your homes from prognosis, the homes that we use to determine your assessment, if you use those as a subject of your sales search, you're going to have to cut and paste them in. Most likely, you'll have to input them one at a time into the application. But they may work just perfectly for you, so either way. So you do see the application. Once you click File the Appeal Online, the application does come up. The tutorial is going to explain how to do the application, but it's the same parts as you saw on the paper. So, you'll decide which way you want to go. And as I said, there are some benefits to doing it online. The only thing you have to remember if you're doing it online, don't wait till the last 10 days. Because that's when these big firms that have anywhere from 16,000 to 30,000 clients are uploading all of their grievance applications into the Assessment Review Commission. So we've heard every single year that people have had trouble getting on to file their appeal, and also, we're getting kicked off, and also we're having a hard time using the website. So I don't know if they've, fixed those problems this year, but our advice is not to wait till the last week or 10 days to file your appeal online. So that's essentially the application itself. And as you can see, it's doable for people to file pro se. It's not as intimidating as most people think. Although, I think at this point in time, most people do feel anxious about it. They are intimidated. It seems that more people are kind of giving up and just hiring somebody to represent them. We certainly don't have the numbers of people coming to my seminar that we had last year or in previous years, because people don't think that they have the ability to do this. But truthfully, you can do it as long as you understand the process, and if you know that, especially that They've even put a tutorial up there to help you do it. Again, you do have to do your sales carefully. It's this process, it's called the comparative market analysis. We have a handout about that. Do you have them on the table? You can take one of those handouts if you want. It discusses, what exactly it is and how it works. I did mention the importance of the settlement conference. It's extremely important. So if you decide to go ahead and do this yourself, make sure on Part C you give them all your information. If you get a decision from them that you don't like or you don't agree with, or if they're telling you they won't reduce your value, you can simply, or you should tell them you don't agree with the decision, because then you're going to go to Part 2. And if you're not happy, you're going to go to Part 3. And if you want to hire a representative for SCAR, you can do that. Now, SCAR is a completely different process than filing one of these small claim, one of these grievance applications. It is a judicial process. You are going into Supreme Court. There's not a judge. They're appointed hearing officers. They're deemed qualified, though, by the court. Most of the time, they're lawyers. They could be real estate professionals, but they are appointed by the court to hear these cases, and they do have the power to preside and to make decisions. There are certain procedural steps that somebody would have to take if they decide to go to SCAR. So you don't want to go, just like the old adage, you shouldn't really represent yourself in court. You shouldn't be your own lawyer. I mean, you can if you know what you're doing, but there are certain legal steps that you have to take in order to file a successful small claims appeal. The first thing is you do have to wait till April. You do have to go to the county court to get and pay $30 to get on the calendar for small claims. But then there's certain, you do have to notify certain parties. You have to notify the school districts that you're doing it. There's basically a list of 10 things that somebody would have to do. So professionals know how to do this. The lawyers know what they're doing. But if you don't follow every single step legally, once you actually get your hearing date, you get into the hearing, the county's going to argue that you didn't do everything correctly and that the case should be thrown out on jurisdictional grounds. And they're successful with that. So you don't want to do this as a novice and not know what you're doing and not know what the legal steps are to do this because you're in court. So there's nothing, it's not like a trial. There's no pre-discovery. When you get in there, there's no there's no court reporter, there's no stenographer. It's not recorded like a court trial. It's simply you and the county. You have to make your case. The county has to defend the value that they initially put on the assessment roll when they published it. You're locked into the value you put on your lower estimated value that you put on Part B, but you could bring in the evidence that you want. Generally, there's no expert witnesses that are called to the witness stand or anything like that. But it is a judicial process, and the hearing officer will decide. And they could do one of four things. They could either reduce your assessment to what you asked. They could reduce your assessment somewhat, but not lower than what you stated on your grievance application. They could deny you, just like the Assessment Review Commission, or they could throw the case out based on jurisdictional grounds. So, one of four things could happen. Most people don't do this by themselves if they don't know what they're doing. But if you do want to do this yourself, you don't want to pay somebody to do it. As you know, if you hire somebody, they could charge anywhere from 35 to 50% of what you save in taxes based upon the reductions. So some people don't want to pay anything. They want to do it themselves. So if you do decide to do this yourself, you have to do some research into SCAR. and know what you're doing. However, let me say, there is a reason why the county doesn't want you to go to SCAR. That's because historically, whether or not the county's been doing annual reassessments in the first decade or of the 21st century, or whether when they froze the assessment roll in the second decade, or now, historically, 50% of the cases get in favor of the plaintiff at SCAR. You have a 50-50 chance to win at SCAR. And you could also bring in more sales and more sales evidence when you get there. So the hearing officers, they're not computers. They're going to look at this and judge it, as they're not doing any kind of analytics or business analytics per se. They're going to judge it based upon its merits. So, and what they're looking for is some substantial evidence to back up your case. And again, if you go into SCAR, but you just, plead mercy that you can't afford the taxes, that's not going to get you very far. So you do have to have a case, but you can build it. Most likely it's going to be based on sales and sales evidence. It might be based on inventory. Specifically, it might have to do with the condition of your home relative to what the county's saying it is. But, you certainly can make a case. This is not an exact science at all. There's an art to it. There's there's a computer program, there's regression analysis that's used in it. Department of Assessment has one program, Assessment Review Commission is using a different program. And certainly you can do your own analysis and come up with a lower value and put it on your grievance application. So, hopefully that's enlightening to everyone, and, you'll go home and think about it. So whether you decide to do this yourself and go forward yourself, or you decide to hire somebody to do it for you, I strongly urge everybody to file one of these things every year. You may hear otherwise from certain county officials that the assessment roll is fixed now and that there's not a need for everybody to file one of these grievances, and you should only file if you really are overvalued based upon some major error that the Department of Assessment made. I've been doing this a long time. First I was the acting receiver of taxes in North Hempstead in 2003. Then I worked at the Department of Assessment for 6 years as the assistant to the chairman. In the first decade, when the county was doing annual reassessments, and I've been receiver of taxes. I was receiver of taxes since 2010. During the whole time, we had the county executive Mangano plan in force, and now. So one thing I could tell you is that the people who file every single year during this whole period of time seem to stay on the curve, or in some years get ahead of the curve, but most likely don't fall behind the curve and don't end up paying more than their fair share of taxes, which is what we want for everyone. We know what the tax levies are. We know what they are in every taxing jurisdiction, but you shouldn't be overassessed, and you shouldn't pay more than your fair share. So this is really what you can do to be proactive. People feel better, they feel empowered when they are proactive. And I want to thank everybody for coming, and I want to wish everybody good luck. So, thank you. Thank you.